Hi, I'm Oliver Cowmeadow, Principal of the International Macrobiotic School, and I want to talk about a very different subject to what I normally talk about. I'm very interested in health, and I'm often talking about health-related subjects. But here I'm going to talk about the Ukraine war. Um, um, you probably share with me just, horror, the amount of destruction and killing and suffering that's going on. Probably over 250,000 soldiers on both sides have been killed. Many more have been injured. Tens of thousands of soldiers having amputations from stepping on mines. Families torn apart, villages, towns, even cities being flattened. Well, what is going on? Well, why are human beings doing this to each other? It seems incomprehensible. How could this happen in this kind of modern time? And what can we do? I think these are some of the questions that we're asking. We're all asking ourselves. Both George Sauer and Michio Kushi witnessed a lot of the Second World War. George Sauer, the man who started off macrobiotics, actually did a lot of campaigning. He was an anti-war protester in Japan during the Second World War. A very dangerous thing to do. He was in prison a long time and almost died from starvation and cold. Michio Kushi also was in Japan, witnessed the horrors and the results of the atomic bombs being dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And actually an understanding of of world history and world evolution and evolution of humanity and where we're going in the future was something that both men talked about a lot, especially Michio Kushi, who I think was deeply intuitive and talked a lot about the future, what's happening at present, and also what's happening in the future. So I want to talk a little bit about their ideas. The first thing I want to say, maybe giving a bit of hope, is that in macrobiotics we're using yin and yang, these complementary opposites, to understand the world and notice that everything goes from one to the other, day and night, winter and summer, life and death, life in the physical world, life in the spiritual world. Everything in the Oriental philosophy, which seems to work pretty well, seems a pretty accurate description of nature and reality, is that everything comes in these pairs of opposites. Right now we're experiencing the horrors of this war, which maybe can lead to the opposite. After the First World War, a lot of countries set up the League of Nations, I think about 50 countries, nations, to try and prevent anything like the World War I happening again. They made some progress, but the Second World War happened. After the Second World War, 1945, the United Nations was set up. A much stronger organization, including most of the countries of the world, again with the objective of trying to create peace in the world and to prevent anything like the Second World War happening again. Unfortunately, there is this massive war going on between Ukraine and Russia after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. One of the agreements of the United Nations was to respect other countries' sovereignty and not to invade them, but Russia has done this. My hope is that, again, it feels like us human beings are sometimes so thick and slow to learn and to value what we really, the good things of life. Again, we're having to witness the horrors of death and destruction and a lot of suffering. And I hope from this will come a firmer feeling, a firmer movement towards peace in the world. Unfortunately, in the meantime, this war is going to play its course. It seems to me, but much more important to various experts, that were Russia to win this war, were they to hold on to a large portion of Ukraine, they wouldn't stop there. You know, their ambitions, as they've stated, is to go back to they'd like to go back to the state of the Soviet Union, retake the Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, etc., Poland, and expand. It seems, you know, why is that? Why is there this urge to expand and have power over other people? But that is their urge. So most commentators will say that the only option they really see for a good outcome for the world is for Crimea to expel Russia from its lands. Very difficult thing to do, but there's a lot of backing in the world for that to happen. Hopefully, when that has happened, there's going to be a reset happening in the world. Again, witnessing the human suffering, the economic destruction, or how it affects everyone in the world economically, and has such a big destructive effect. You know, hopefully the Russian people and peoples all over the world will witness this, possibly, if that's their course of action. Another country in the world which has very strong expansionist aims is China, wanting to retake, for example, Taiwan. It seems unbelievable. Why? The Taiwanese people are happy. They're not doing it for the Taiwanese people. They're doing it for that political elite that wants to take over Taiwan. It wants China to expand. Those leaders want more power. Same with Putin and the people around him. And maybe quite a number of people in Russia. They want power over people. But hopefully, as things progress and come to conclusion, there may be a stronger urge in the world to, having seen these horrors, to create more peace. Let's pray for that. And what can we do in the meantime? I think one thing we can do on a practical level is to support Ukraine. There is a very good charity called United 24. If you Google United 24, this is a charity started off by Ukrainian President Zelensky. And they're up to, I think, nearly $500 million have been donated. And you can donate for humanitarian purposes, or for the defense, or for arms, whichever you feel moved to. I think the Ukrainian people really, really, really need our support right now. Macrobiotics, I forgot to bring my couple of books in here. Michio Kushi wrote a book, One Peaceful World. He took on George Sauer's teaching that a fundamental way of creating peace in the world is through our food. And that if we eat a balanced plant-based diet, this creates a much more emotionally, mentally balanced, reasonable, realistic, grounded, compassionate, and spiritually open body and being. And this was George Sauer's teaching back in the 1950s, 40s and 50s, which Michio and Evelyn Kushi and a lot of other macrobiotic students took on. And this was a big motivation for them to go to America, South America, etc., and Europe, and to spread macrobiotic teachings, to create world peace in the face of the horrors of the Second World War. So something else we can do, I think, is through our food, through eating a balanced plant-based way. It changes our consciousness, it changes our motivations, it changes, helps us to connect us with our food, with nature, with other people, and feel a natural compassion towards others, to feel an equality with other people and with nature, rather than feeling superior or inferior, and which are often the grounds for conflict and war. So we can do practical things. We can also change ourselves and many other things, I'm sure. Michio Kushi talked about the evolution of humanity and the planet in a very profound way. And he talked about this in his book, One Peaceful World. And he also wrote another book in 1980, The Era of Humanity, Visions of a Future World. I think it's titled this. Very, very interesting book in which he makes a lot of predictions, which astoundingly are pretty much coming true at the moment. I really recommend you find that book, probably secondhand. It may not be being published anymore. And what he said, and I'm sure other people are saying this as well, is that there are many cycles for us on Earth. We go through a daily cycle. We're active during the day. We go to sleep at night. We have a monthly cycle, a moon cycle, which especially affects the tides, and also particularly women, women's menstrual cycle, and women's moods, but also men. I was just talking to someone the other day, a man who said he just, around full moon, he finds it difficult to sleep, feels very activated, etc. These cycles, night and day, yearly cycle, summer and winter, it really changes how we are. It changes what we do, it changes our bodies, changes how we think, it changes what we like to do. Then there is also a much larger cycle, which is 25,800 years long, called the precession of the axis, of the world's axis. This is recognized scientifically, very well described. And what it means is that the Earth's axis at the moment is pointing, the North Pole is pointing in this direction, and and it goes through a big wobble. It has a wobble, the Earth's spinning. So in 13,000 years, it will be pointing in quite a different direction. And in another 13,000 years, it comes back to the original place. So the North Pole is making this big circuit in the sky. Energetically, Michio says that a lot of energy comes in, particularly in the North Pole, also the South Pole, but especially the North Pole. Just the same as our bodies, a lot of energy comes down through our crown chakra, down our spiritual channel, through our whole bodies, affecting our physical health, our consciousness, etc. The energy that comes into the North Pole depends on where the axis is pointing. So I know you can't see this map in detail. I always love watching the stars. So at the moment, you probably know that the North Pole is pointing towards Polaris, the star Polaris. And if you want to find it, you find the Great Bear, and the last two stars are pointing towards Polaris. But this is not always the case. The Earth's axis is going to move in a circle coming through the Milky Way. And in 13,000 years, we'll be pointing towards the star Vega. And then in another 13,000 years, it comes back to Polaris. So all cycles you can divide into a yin and a yang half. There's kind of opposite qualities. So Michio Kushi's teachings, and I'm sure he's tuned into or got this from other people's teachings, this is kind of ancient teaching, is that we're on a turning point right now, entering this light age, where the North Pole is going to be pointing much more into the Milky Way. The reason there's the Milky Way is when we're in this disk, we're about 2/3 the way out, and when the Earth's North Pole is pointing in this direction, it's pointing into the Milky Way, so we're getting a lot of light and energy coming out of the Milky Way into the Earth. Then at another time, it's pointing outside the Milky Way, and it receives much less energy and light coming in the North Pole. So that creates a kind of light age on the planet and a dark age. And Michio and other people are saying that this has a very big effect on us humans, on nature, and on our consciousness, and our culture, and what we like to do, and how we think, and our spirituality. Basically, that when the North Pole is pointing more towards, this is a very simple human being standing on the Earth, that when the North Pole is pointing more in towards the Milky Way, there's a lot more energy coming into the North Pole and also into our bodies from above. And this particularly charges up the upper chakras. The upper chakras is when that is very active, that's how we can, that really excites, enlivens our more spiritual consciousness, how we feel connected to everything. Our sixth chakra, which is where our more wisdom is based, as well as kind of fifth, etc. So during this light age, these upper chakras are much more active, and so there's an orientation more towards spirituality. When our crown chakras are really active, then we have a less strong sense of self. We have more of a sense of connection to everything, and everything being valuable. Other people, every human being is equally valuable. Nature is valuable, everything in nature, including the earth and rocks and the air, water, everything is valuable, and everything is treasured, and everything is looked after. Not exactly what is happening on the planet right now, as we're in a global warming crisis, and we're having to face this fact. Then so he says this is more the time of peace. This is the half where people become much more interested in peace, in relating well to each other, in accepting each other, accepting differences between different people, and finding harmonious ways to live together. Then there's the dark age. This stimulation is not happening so much in the upper chakras, and then we are receiving more energy from the earth, which is more stimulating the lower chakras. Our lower chakras are more to do with our personal survival. Our bottom chakra is to do with I, feeling I, what I want, and my survival, and what I need. The second chakra with our bodily, sexual needs. Our third chakra with our personal, emotional needs. The heart is the balancing chakra in the middle of all seven, where we become much more aware of other people and other people's needs, etc. So in this dark, in what Michio is calling the dark age, there's much more emphasis on personal survival and personal power, and we're at the changing point in this cycle at this time, between the end of the dark age, time of personal power, and the beginning of the light age, of more feeling of connection and a more peaceful, you could say more spiritual time. In the dark age, there is much more focus on wanting to on physical possession, whether that's land, water, objects, money, gold, etc. This is what I want. This is what I need. And setting up a big institutions, big powerful institutions to make that happen. To give an example, a few years ago, I was watching a program on how Coca-Cola, with its high sugar content, has really become with very clever advertising, become part of the culture of Mexico, and the rate of diabetes, consequently, the rate of diabetes in Mexico was very high. The rate of leg amputations, because one of the effects of uncontrolled diabetes is poor circulation, which can lead to gangrene in the legs and amputation, was 75,000 people a year, if I remember correctly. Astounding. What is going on? What are these executives and the people running Pepsi Cola? They're doing so much damage. They're doing so much harm. But in our society, that's been justified. That's okay, because it's making money. If it's making money, that's okay. The tobacco industry fought for decades against the truth coming out that tobacco was bad for the health. Now they've had to admit it. How is it that we have these enormous businesses that are making money that are creating illness and suffering and destruction on the planet? It's almost incomprehensible. How can that be? In the UK, I was astounded to hear that on average, 50% of the calorie or the energy intake of people in the UK comes from ultra processed foods. That means highly processed, complete crap foods. That means laden with sugar, artificial ingredients, trans fats, not real food. Not surprising, we're losing, a lot of people are losing their feeling of humanity, and there's a lot of physical and also emotional illness in that. How can that be that it's right for the UK population? In the United States, apparently it's 60%. This is so destructive on physical and emotional and mental and spiritual health, and yet we allow it in our society because, oh, it makes money. This is the dark age. Money, base chakra. Nothing wrong with money, using it correctly. Nothing wrong with looking after ourselves physically, but making money the god has been very destructive, and we're now having to face that in the world. Very interestingly, these two crossing over points in this cycle. I can't think how to draw it right now. 13,000 years ago, what Michio says is 13,000 years ago, there's destruction by water, fire and water, these two opposites, yin and yang. 13,000 years ago, when the Earth's axis is pointing towards Vega, there's the danger of destruction by water. And this is what happened. Many parts of the world have myths around the floods. In the Bible, we have the story of Noah and his family building the ark, etc. And then Michio says that because at the end of every cycle, when things change, there's destruction and there's rebuilding. We tend to like building and growing. We tend not to like destruction. So destruction has to happen at the end of the light age and at the end of the dark age in order to create newness and a new movement. So he says the destruction at the end of the dark age, which is where we are now, is by fire. We have used fire, first of all, to produce metals in the Bronze Age, and then the Industrial Revolution, and now we use vast amounts of energy. And when he wrote The Era of Humanity in 1980, he was saying one possible way that humanity could destroy itself and much of the planet was through nuclear war. Interesting, war, what does it use? It uses fire, bullets, explosives. It's all about using fire. And then he says, and possibly the industrialization is going to lead to a lot of pollution, which is really going to affect our health and planet. There wasn't a wide consciousness of global warming, but what we're seeing now is impending destruction by global warming from the overuse of fire. So actually in his prediction, he was seeing the pattern clearly, but wasn't aware yet of global warming, which is the current crisis that we're facing in the whole world. So And this is the whole point of studying cycles, of studying yin and yang and studying cycles. And we also study 5 transformations or 5 elements a lot in macrobiotics. We understand the cycles of nature, and we're part of nature, so we're governed by cycles. Part of the dark ages, we think somehow we're separate. You know, the lower chakras, we feel separate. We think we can override nature, we can use nature, we can plunder nature, and there'll be no consequences. When we're more in our hearts, in the upper chakras, of course, there's a connection. If we do harm to others, it's doing harm to ourselves. So we study yin and yang, we study cycles, so that we understand where we're going, what is happening to ourselves individually, what's happening in nature, what's happening in the world. So this 26,000, roughly 26,000 precession of the axis is a very interesting cycle. When I first heard this, when I started studying macrobiotics in 1980, I have to say I'd studied biology, degree in zoology, and I was quite scientifically minded, and I heard this and I thought, wow, this is really wacky. This is wacky stuff. But I didn't close my mind to it. And when I look back over the last 43 years, I see a lot of evidence for exactly what he's saying. We are in this place of enormous change between old ways of doing things and new ways of doing things. In agriculture, in economics, in work, in health, in our thinking, in our consciousness. 40 years ago, I remember getting insurance for giving shiatsu. On the insurance company, they had a list of about 10 or at the most 12 different complementary therapies. I talked to the same company a week or so ago. They now have 3,000 different complementary medicine approaches. Complementary medicine has blossomed. We still have the old way of approaching health, which is very large scale, very technological. Doesn't take much notice of nature's laws. It regards symptoms as being the illness. If we get headaches, that's a symptom. That's not the problem. That's a symptom of some disharmony, dysfunction going on in the body. That's what we need to change. It's not the headache. If we create harmony and balance in our body, then most headaches, unless they're 99% of headaches and migraines will go, unless they're caused by some more serious change like a brain tumor or something. So we've had Western medicine, which has brought enormous benefits, and I wouldn't want to do without, especially when I go to the dentist. Let's use the best of Western medicine, but its whole attempt to cure symptoms is so misguided, rather than looking for the causes of illness, which in the last 10 or 15 years it has, thank goodness, started doing. 40 years ago, if you said the food had a big effect on health, Western medicine would say, no, that's rubbish. The last 10 years, if you said 30 years ago that food and lifestyle was a primary cause of cancer, in the medical world, you would have been lynched. In the last 10 years, they're saying, oh yes, well, large intestine cancer is very linked with high meat consumption, breast cancer with a high fat consumption, and so on and so on. Now, I don't know, up to 15, 20 different cancers, which good evidence that diet and lifestyle and also emotions are a primary cause of these illnesses, which is why we've gone in the last 100 years from maybe something like 1 in 20 people developing cancer to 1 in 2. And what is the new medicine? Obviously, we want to keep the best of Western medicine. We need yin and yang. But the new medicine is, you could say it's more feminine. In some ways, the dark age is the more masculine energy, the light age is more the feminine. Healing through food, massage, touch, body work, emotional healing, psychological support, community support. This is what even science is beginning to realize are the root causes of most illness. This is a softer medicine. This is a medicine that is going with nature. It's respecting nature. It's also very, very much cheaper. It is very much cheaper to change your diet, start taking some exercise, creating positive relationships, finding work which really suits you, etc. That is a great deal cheaper than the highly expensive modern technological medicine. Agriculture has come to, rather than working with nature, what do you do in modern agriculture? You clear a field of all plants, you plow it, you destroy the soil structure, you plant your plants, you have to use fertilizer because you've taken away the natural fertilization, and you're growing monocrops, which then diseases just love, bugs, bacteria just love monocultures because they can breed and multiply and multiply. And this system, and then often because you've removed a lot of the plant cover, then it's too dry, maybe you have to water as well. And all this becomes very expensive. And where does the fertilizer come from? It's dug up out of the earth, transported around the world. This is an expensive energetically in terms of global warming. It's an expensive form of agriculture. Organic agriculture tends to be more natural forms of agriculture, using more fertilization. It's like the old style farming we had even 50, 80 years ago, where you had some cattle and you used their droppings, their manure on the fields to fertilize them. You didn't buy fertilizer from outside. So we're in the middle of, well, at the beginning maybe, of a revolution in agriculture, which is very much needed. We have biodynamic agriculture and ways of working more with nature. Economics, the same. Just the shoots of a new economics. The old economics, we need more growth. How do we get out of our present, the thinking in virtually every country is, how do we get out of debt? With more growth, we make more money, and then there'll be more taxes, and then we can get out of debt. You'll hear virtually every country saying this, but the only people I haven't heard saying this is the Green Party. This is impossible. Growth, 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 that's yin. At some point, there's got to be a contraction. There's got to be yang. If we grow too much, then the bigger the contraction there's going to be. It's simple, it's common sense, it's just like a child can understand that. But modern economics doesn't. Perpetual growth is just so destructive on the planet. Including creating global warming, including getting rid of a lot of nature in order to grow food and energy crops, etc., etc. So we need a revolution in economics. We need a stable economics where there's no growth, there's zero growth. No, actually, humanity in the world has enough. If we shared it out, we have plenty. We have more than enough to live comfortably and warmth and have enough food, but it's not shared out. So a lot of people want more. A lot of people who have a great deal want even more. This is ignoring the effect it has on nature. So many different teachings around that, different education systems, different economic systems, different business systems. We're in the middle of this revolution, which is very much needed. We need to kill the old, bring in the new. This is the challenge for us at this time. So many different movements, all of which are important in leaving behind the old and creating this new world where there's going to be mutual respect for each other and for nature, for the earth. This was a very strong part of macrobiotics in its early days, definitely a very strong motivator for Michio and Evelyn Cushy and a lot of other teachers. And I still feel that macrobiotics has a great deal to offer. It really has a good understanding of how food and daily lifestyle and exercise affects us, not only physically, but also emotionally. We're seeing an emotional breakdown in modern developed countries, in the UK, North America, And many other countries, the amount of mental illness, anxiety, depression, etc., is rising rapidly. They're only just beginning to look at one of the reasons. I'm sure there's a number of reasons. One of the reasons is ultra processed foods. If you eat completely artificial foods, then of course that doesn't make it easy to become human. When we eat our natural foods, real foods, whole foods, then the foods that we've evolved to eat over the last 10 million or so years, then that helps us to become human and feel strong and resilient. Macrobiotics also puts a lot of emphasis on self-reliance, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Mostly we can look after our own health. When we can't, then we can go and get some help from macrobiotic counselors, other complementary health practitioners, and if we need it, from Western medicine. And thank goodness it's there when we really need it. But it teaches self-reliance. Personally, and this is not a brag, I've since I got into macrobiotics, I've seen a doctor twice for 10 minutes and 2 nurses to get a minor medical cut glued up and stuff for 10 minutes or 15 minutes each. So I have created so far very little cost to the health system because I practice self-reliance, rather than modern culture, which is, well, I don't care what I do, there's no connection between my food and my behavior and my thinking and my health, therefore I'll do exactly what I like. And then if I become ill, then someone else is going to pick up the bill and look after me. And that's basically a child's behavior, thinking that their parents are going to pick them up. So I really like how macrobiotics teaches self-reliance and uses its whole yin-yang philosophy to understand the world, to understand nature, to understand its natural cycles. So talking about kind of coming back to where I started off with the war that's going on in Ukraine. Let's hope, that this Miccio's ideas on the Dark Age and the Light Age is true. He was working very clearly for the coming Light Age with macrobiotics, along with recognizing there's a lot of other teachings doing the same. So let's hope this is the way we're going. Let's hope we collectively, humanity on the planet, can learn from the horrors of this war and take a deeper step towards creating peace in the world. And just collectively seeing just what is the consequence of this territorial grabbing. It's just an immense amount of suffering and destruction. I hope this has helped a little. I think having a wider perspective on things can help us to know where we're going and what we need to do. So a bit of a sober subject, but unfortunately, us human beings are evolving. We're not evolved, we're evolving. And we're trying to learn how to be peaceful, intelligent, intuitive, grounded, common sense, kind beings. And we're not there yet. Collectively, we're not there yet. So unfortunately, just as in our personal life, if there's something we haven't learned, we attract conflict and difficulties. And this is what we're facing. This is what humanity is facing right now. Some very big challenges with the war, with global warming. What is always needed in these situations? Learning and new ways of living. So that's what the more we can do that, the more we can learn, find new ways of living with each other, with the planet, with our bodies, which is part of nature. And the faster we're going to be able to create maybe this one peaceful world, which was Miccio and Evelyn's dream. Okay, thank you very much for listening.